All right, everyone. When we millennials were younger, when we were in our 20s or our teens, typically the GOP was associated with old fogies, with corporations, with big money, with things like that. And the youth vote tended to veer off way on to left field. That appears to have been flipped. Link in the description, archived of course. The youth vote is projected to be pretty narrow, actually. That is that about half of the younger voters, the under 35s, of course, I'm a little bit out of that now. I'm 36. I'm showing my age. I remember the W era. They're going actually for Donald Trump, and it's no surprise to me. I'll tell you why. Donald Trump is the dissident candidate. He's the one that represents the outside of the beltway sort of mentality. It's not that he hasn't been president, so he has political experience. It's not that he's young. He's in his late 70s. It's not that he represents an opinion that is terribly outside of the orthodoxy of the uniparty system. But his rival is older than he is by 4 years. He's in his early 80s now, Joe Biden. And he represents the uniparty heterodoxy, so to speak. And so Donald Trump, I think, is seen by the youth vote as being the outsider. And I mean, I agree with this. I mean, it's not just he's being seen that way, he actually is. But they're correctly gauging it. I told people, don't be so worried about the so-called far-left leanings of Gen Z. Don't be worried about that. The youth is all right. What were we millennials cast as when we were younger? We're far left. We didn't know what the fuck we were doing. The kids are not all right, basically. Gen X was treated the same way. Hell, the boomers were treated the same way. When they were younger, what were they doing? Half of them were hippieing it up. They were seen as unorthodox, as dissidents, and so forth. The same thing is true of Gen Z, and Gen Alpha will be treated the same way. It'll be very, very funny, because it'll always be wrong. The youth will never conform, and I think that's a good thing, actually. To conform right now means to conform to uniparty neoliberalism. Well, hell, if Gen Z wants to go for Donald Trump just as a protest vote or something like that, I think that it's a wonderful thing. Certainly helps our wallets, certainly is going to help our border, certainly is going to help, well, pretty much anything under the bus. Foreign policy, domestic policy, border policy, tax policy, finance in general. I think that it's a good thing. Donald Trump, according to this link in the description, archived of course, is now favored among younger voters. In fact, the voting bloc that goes most heavily for Joe Biden, it's the elderly. It's the over 75 voters. Those are the ones that are most likely to vote for Joe Biden. Not a surprise at all. I mean, number one, he's in their age cohort, even though Donald Trump is as well. But he represents the old uniparty establishment, the one that was favored by voters that were young in the 90s or the 80s or something like that. Whereas Donald Trump, even though he's basically a reboot of first-term Ronald Reagan, represents an outside view that people haven't seen in a while. He's the dissident vote. I realize that there are third parties out there that represent more of a dissident vote. The Libertarian Party, maybe Cornel West or Jill Stein, even RFK Jr. to an extent, even though, yeah, generally speaking, policy-wise, he's still on board with the orthodoxy of the uniparty. He's an anti-gunner and so forth. That's perfectly fine. But most people play with a two-party mentality within the United States. They're either a Republican or a Democrat, or they lean in one direction or another. That's like 80% of the population. So if you get the youth cohort, if you get the 18 to 35 voters, the young voters, and you ask them who they're going to support, they're more likely to support somebody who's an outsider. Well, what's more of an outsider? The dude who's been in the Senate since the 1970s, was a VP, then is now the President of the United States, or at least on paper, or the dude who served one term as president, got basically gadflied out of it by the uniparty establishment, tore everything to pieces while he was in office, and was, reckoned to be some sort of villainous, terrible creature as a result of it, and who generally had a private life beforehand. He was a corporatist. Donald Trump mainly, he built buildings, he built skyscrapers and stuff like that. Ah, that's delicious, by the way. Unfortunately, it's not jam and bean. Which one is more the outsider? Well, it's Donald Trump. He's not been in D.C. for more than half his life, like Joe Biden has. Joe Biden has spent most of his life in D.C. And so it's not a surprise to me that younger voters would flock to Donald Trump. It's no surprise. These are dissident voters. The youth tends to be dissident anyway. Do you remember, my fellow millennials, when we were young, what were we doing? Protesting the war in Iraq and things like that. That's just that's sort of the way that it was. It was the right thing to do, by the way, at the time. And even though our Facebook posts and our change.org petitions may not have made any real difference, there was at least an effort that was made. And I think that that's what's actually going on here. I think that the youth vote is going for Donald Trump mainly because Donald Trump is being castigated as being an enemy of the state. Well, yeah, we're enemies of the state too. Even us millennials, now that we're middle-aged, we're still enemies of the state, are we not? Everyone hates the state. It's a good thing. I think there should be more hate for it, actually. I think that the older voters, you need to get in line. Fall in line with the youth for once, boomers. It'd be a good thing. Fuck Joe Biden. I think that's a wonderful. So yeah, link in the description. You can read through that. Apparently in youth voter polling, that is that the younger voter cohort has veered off way in Trump's direction as opposed to in the left-wing direction. Supposedly this is antithetical to what has been proposed, which is supposedly the youth is going way, way far left. So they're becoming more and more progressive, so to speak. They're becoming more and more left-wing. But that's not actually happening at the executive level. I realize that some of them have those left-wing policies, but that doesn't mean that they're not outsiders. That doesn't mean that they don't appreciate a fellow dissident, and I think that that explains it fairly well. That's about all. Peace out.